now. Do you guys have any insight on how is the change that you've seen as far as strategy and best practices?
Yeah, I had the fortunate or unfortunate perspective of being on political campaigns before the digital age. So I think, and we worked on the McCain campaign in 2008. I probably should have mentioned that at the beginning. It was awesome in a different way to watch the Obama campaign operate from a digital perspective on the other side. It was just overwhelming in a lot of ways. But the one thing that I've seen since 2008, the big change is just the conversation in general. I mentioned this to a few people earlier. It used to be, should we do digital, was the question that was asked. Now it's really how much of our resources are we going to allocate? And I think the fact that there are positions like his at a major committee, the Republican Governors Association, and all the campaigns, the Romney campaign is furiously trying to staff up with digital staffers, and Obama has too many to count at this point, is really pretty indicative of how important this has become.
Yeah, definitely. In the world of politics, change is a lot slower than it is anywhere else. Corporate America caught up to the social media stuff and online advertising several years before we did. And to me, the biggest thing that I've seen in change from 2008 to 2012 is the growth of, this is no longer something that you do as a luxury. It's like buying a TV ad, it's like buying a radio ad, it's part of the whole mix now. And Obama has moved on from convincing folks that we need to do digital to innovating how we do digital. He's really big into data. He's trying to find information on you in ways that you don't even realize that he's finding information on you. If you sign that I'm in button when you're on Facebook, you're giving over not only your location and your name and your friends and who you're connected with, but your likes on Facebook. So he knows a ridiculous amount of information about you. And that is something he can use to retarget. If he can give you a specific message in an email, for example, because he knows that you like maybe your local Republican congressman, but you also like Barack Obama, so you can find out that that's kind of a centrist voter and target specific messages to them. And the other thing that I really like Obama's doing is that he's treating social as more than just interns tweeting out things and sending out Facebook updates. He's got engineers, he has designers, he has people doing infographics, he has people that he's plucked from the private sector in very technical terms to do things for him, to construct things from the ground up. And it's been phenomenal to watch. A little scary from our perspective, but certainly something to model off of.
I don't think Matt could have said it better. I totally agree that Obama's really on to the next phase of this, and in the 16th cycle we're going to see, when Obama's not running, we're going to see everybody that doing this kind of data mining stuff is going to be the baseline, and we're going to be on to the next big thing. So I'm going to just add something to this from my background in journalism, and it's the way people are consuming news about this campaign. As the New York Times put it, we're in a 24-second news cycle right now. Stuff blows up. The Etch-a-Sketch comment blew up on social media. I think that was fueled by social media. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Romney's senior advisor Eric Bernstrom made a comment on MSNBC about how the campaign is going to reset itself for the general election from the primaries, presumably moving a little bit more toward the center. And he said it's like an Etch-a-Sketch, and everybody it just blew up. And then there was the whole thing, I mentioned the infographics. There was the Obama Life with Julia infographic, which was about 2 weeks ago, and it just blew up on Twitter and social media, people making fun of it. And I said at the time, when was the last time somebody attacked a person who didn't even exist? a hypothetical person, and people were attacking her. Poor Julia. But
Julia, the web designer.
yes, clearly named after somebody who actually designed it or something like that. But it's just the smallest of things are big things now because people are just so hungry. And social media is a fire that needs to be kept. It needs to keep getting fed with stuff. Otherwise, people are bored. So
I think that's a good point if we can just expand upon it. The speed at which these news cycles are happening, the Etch-a-Sketch comment was really chewed up and spit out by most of the media before a newspaper was printed the next day. So just think about that from a campaign perspective. I know a guy that was working on the Gingrich campaign, and he said that people would call him with stuff about the campaign. He was on the inside, had no idea that it was happening because it was just already getting chewed up in social media already. So I mean, the speed is blinding for most of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I know you spoke about, Obama having engineering staff and all these different people to handle his social media and things like that. But do you guys think that, having the top 3 social media platforms that we have, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, is it valuable for, all the different things that we have coming out every day? Is it valuable for like the campaigns to jump on to these new things, like Pinterest? Obviously, Obama jumped on Pinterest, and is it valuable to jump on, have a lot of the social media, tools that are coming out, on a new basis? Is it a good idea to jump on that?
I think, well, with social media, you have to really look at what goals you're trying to achieve. Obama went and they placed ads in video games in 2008. Maybe not the best media strategy, maybe not the best way that they spent money to reach voters, but it certainly got them a lot of news stories. It got them a lot more ink than taking that money and throwing it onto radio or internet, whatever, spending that money however you would have liked, would have ever gotten them. So depending on how you're doing it, if you're getting into Pinterest to really reach voters in Ohio, particularly with a voting age population as to where it is, might not be your best strategy. But if you're getting there just to kind of say you're there and say you're hip, I mean, you guys deal with this all the time because it's perception, it's not really reality. You're
Exactly.
trying to look something that you're not.
It's, the Obama campaign is joining sites like Pinterest and Tumblr and Instagram, and also the Romney campaign is that they're also on Instagram, and Ann Romney is on Pinterest. They're not. I don't believe they're on Tumblr yet, but they're joining these sites for branding. Barack Obama is a brand. Mitt Romney is a brand, and when you join these sites, you're not necessarily joining them to get out the vote. You're joining them to push a brand. And to brand your candidate as someone who maybe I would want to vote for, to humanize a candidate, to show those cool pictures or whatever, to share Aunt Romney's recipes. That's what it's for, I feel. That's what those newer sites are for. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to repeat everybody, but that's exactly what it is. It's a branding thing, it's a messaging thing, because essentially you're talking about a new way to contact a voter. And it's silly, and it probably does almost nothing, but it's certainly something that can portray him as someone that's ahead of the curve, trying new things, interested in things that haven't been done before, and that's basically, by itself, I mean, it's basically free for him to do that. And by just using a little bit of energy to do that, he brands himself in a certain respect. So.
And just to jump on that real quick, it's also they're branding themselves in a key demographic, which is the young voters, which is really key, especially to Obama's strategy. It's going to be hard for Obama, to win in November if he doesn't have the kind of support he had from young voters in '08. And so he needs to get that excitement, and that's why OFA, Obama for America, which is Obama's committee, is really trying hard to be on and be on these sites as they become cool to be on. So they were, actually Romney beat them to Pinterest, but they were first on Instagram, they were first on Tumblr. They're trying to brand themselves in this young demographic.
And the interesting thing too is that it's a zero-sum game here. It's not like there's any sort of loss if it doesn't work out.
Right.
I don't think anybody probably remembers, but President Obama was on MySpace in 2008. And
the site is still there.
It's still up. It's funny to look at, but he was there. And, it didn't really do much for his campaign, Facebook, and Twitter, and everything else did. But if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out, and nobody really cares. So.
Yeah, so as far as I know, like a lot of these campaigns are joining these different sites to target specific audiences. For example, I've read an article about social media. A lot of women, are on there, on social media, especially like with Pinterest blowing up and things like that. And then as far as when you said about Obama and the young vote, so strategy-wise, do you think that's for them to join the different, be more active on Twitter and Facebook? Do you think which way do you think it will be to grab the young audience? Do you think is a platform that's more successful that they should be focusing more attention on, like Twitter, as far as the young folks, or what do you think?
I would kind of take that just a little bit of a different way. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of people that work for PR companies or have a PR background here. And there used to be, well, there still is a lot of money spent in this town trying to reach Capitol Hill reporters and members of Congress. And really, we're looking at Twitter as one of the best vehicles to reach Hill reporters. They live and they die. We were just having this conversation before. They are on Twitter all day long, and it's almost in a way replaced the AP wire. If you think
right,
about it.
nobody reads press releases anymore.
Yeah. It's just too slow, right?
You can find things out on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you can absolutely take the social networks and slice and dice them and see how best to use them. And I think when you're trying to reach the quote-unquote influential crowd, I think Twitter is just a great way to do that. It's not as much, you know, we got into it earlier with the Pinterest comment. When you're talking about, I think the last stat I saw was 13% of the Americans are on Twitter. I think feel free to correct me here, but that's a lot of people. But it's still, you know, we're hovering about 50 for Facebook. So I mean, if you think about the differences in reach there, it's pretty large. So.
Yeah, and these social networks are starting to resemble the American people in general anyway. I mean, the more people join Facebook, the more it's a large sample of the American population. So I don't necessarily try to view social networks individually as a good place to reach women or a good place to reach young people or anything like that. I try to view within the social networks themselves how to find the audience I want to find in those social networks and then market to them. That's why Obama has spent so much time on Facebook. He's found out, obviously, that it's very easy to find out when people self-identify as a woman, a conservative, who is 18 to 24, that you can go find that person and send them, put an ad in front of their face, or you can have them marketed to in some way. So it's a good idea to try to more holistically look at these things together.
I agree. I think that, you know, each network is a little different in how they operate and what they can and can't do. And I think, you know, in terms of driving traffic to your campaign side, in terms of soliciting donations, I mean, there's no question that Facebook is the most effective. But in terms of getting news out, in terms of doing opposition kind of work, I think Twitter is the best. Not opposition work, rapid response work, and opposition work, but rapid response is what I meant to say. I think that, you know, and there are these other new ones, but I think that, you know, it's really just who you're reaching and, you know, how you're reaching them is what the campaigns are looking for in this.
Okay, thanks, Easton. So, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. You know, in the saying that people say, you know, content is king these days, you know, as far as, you know, a video and things like that. So a lot of the politicians are doing TV appearances, doing different things, you know, for campaigning. Do you guys think it's a good idea to put that stuff immediately on YouTube, or have people to follow them as not press, but someone on their staff to videotape so they can put that content immediately on YouTube? Do you think that's a good idea to get a lot of things out there? Because, you know, a lot of video now is being filmed on so many things. It can be looked at on so many different types of things. You know, people have iPhones and things of that nature. So you think that's an idea to have video placed immediately after you have footage from a TV appearance or footage from any type of rally or things like that? Do you think that's a good idea to put that stuff out there?
I'll punt on that one because I know these guys are doing it, but we'll make one comment beforehand if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I think it's funny how there's, you know, George Allen got tripped up on the macaca moment by a guy that was out there with the video camera.
Mm-hmm.
The tracker is really dead these days because technology is so far ahead of that. Now we're all trackers in a way. So it's really put candidates on their toes. And, you know, there was a congressional candidate up in Buffalo who was caught, Jack Davis, who was caught attacking a supporter from the other campaign. It wasn't I'm stretching when I call it an attack, but it was somebody on a cell phone. So, you know, there is more video out there than ever before. But I know you guys do this stuff. So.
I would say that, to me, honestly, uploading your own content is about controlling it. it's a way to not only if you have your own person filming it, it comes out the right way you want to, or if there are news, you have the content on first, so people find your stuff when you search for it. But more importantly, if you're aggressive and you use those kinds of assets, I mean, look at Chris Christie. Chris Christie's entire personality and his entire persona has been built on YouTube because he would find, obviously, that a teacher mouthing off to him or something like that he could kind of go a little back and forth with. One of his staff filming it can put it up on YouTube, and then immediately 100,000 people in conservative websites have seen it like in like 2 days. So that's actually what really propelled him to the front of this kind of debate publicly about unions and about a lot of other things in education. So it's about control, and it's about making sure that your message is out as quickly and efficiently as possible.
I don't think, and you're right about controlling, and I think Christie is a unique situation that he's built a following and built a community around his videos, but I think for most politicians, I mean, rapidly uploading your TV hits or your whatever, your campaign events to YouTube is useless because nobody's going to watch it. I mean, if it's worth watching, journalists like me will put it up. I mean, something happens on cable. I mean, people watch cable all day in these newsrooms. Something happens, we're immediately getting that up. It's a mad dash between BuzzFeed, Talking Points Memo, Huffington Post, Washington Post to get those clips up really fast. And those are what are getting the views. It's not like some speech. People don't have the attention span for that. They'll upload a 45-second clip of something. Perfect example. This wasn't so political, but there was an incident on SMC last Friday between Cameron Hall and a gentleman by the name of Tim Carney, who works for the Washington Examiner, and she cut his mic off. And within, because they were fighting about something that Romney said, or actually, ironically, fighting about a TV interview Romney had done about talking about medical marijuana. And within 10 minutes of this happening, BuzzFeed had a clip up. BuzzFeed has the community and the following for it to go viral really fast, and it did. And everybody was talking about it on a Friday afternoon, which is worth close to nothing, but
I do agree with that to some extent, but I do think it's valuable to have all that content on there, even though it's junk. I don't disagree with that at all. A speech, if you're a United States senator giving a floor speech, absolutely no one will watch it. But if you go on YouTube and you search for Senator Tom Coburn, and he has uploaded all of his speeches, the results that you'll get back are him rather than watch Tom Coburn get torched on this, which a liberal activist might upload or something like that. It's a way of controlling your message and making sure that you have a kind of holistic view of your content. So,
I think you tripped into a good point though about the Friday upload there, because there was just an article put out by one of the link shorteners about they had taken all the data.
Yes.
And who was that?
Bitly.
And it was what? Was it Monday or Tuesday at 3 that was the best time?
Yeah. I mean, we went over that article at HuffPost and we were like, this is BS. It was just very arbitrary. There were some very broad things about this that said, like, don't post after such and such on Friday, which, yeah, I agree with. Friday afternoon is not the ideal time to get your workout, but it was like, the most ideal time is Tuesday at 3 o'clock to post something. And it's like, okay, well, my job and, a lot of other people I work with in the editorial social media sphere, I'm scheduling 24 hours a day worth of tweets, and pretty much close to that on Facebook as well. So I'm not following Bitly's guidance on when I should and shouldn't post. I'm posting things when there's news.
But there was a lot of interesting data in there. You think about the wealth of just volume.
Right. It was fascinating, but and I really did learn a lot from that post. But in terms of following their guidance, I prefer not.
And I think for anybody who's out there who's managing a social media account, that's definitely a must read. That I just saw. It came out like 2 days ago, right?
I think sometime last week. But yeah, it was really, really good. I would recommend it, even though I don't necessarily agree with the suggestions.
Okay, good. So just to touch on the video aspect of everything, it also saves journalists time too, as far as people who work in communication shops and things like that. They can just take clips like that and use it for B-roll if they want, as opposed to just beating your door down for, hey, you have any video? Do you have this? So that sometimes it just saves a lot of time and a lot of conflict sometimes, and to find footage to get the information out there.
We put watermarks on our videos, and so does everyone else, to prevent that from being used clean. So it's kind of like a must credit deal.
Absolutely. Okay, so now I know we're talking about the whole, social media team and things like that. So do you think that it is important to have people on a social media team running campaigns? Do you think it's effective to have people who are more political savvy as opposed to, have communication skills? Do you think one balance out the other, or which one do you think is more important to have, political skills or communication skills as far as running a social media, your platform?
I think we've seen it. It's not going to be a surprise to anybody. It's just about authenticity, really. If the more that it looks cooked, the more that it is cooked up, the more that people will pick up on that. They expect you to have typos and to have some fails every once in a while. So I think the things that we've seen successful in social media have just been authentic, even if they haven't worked. Sometimes your audience responds to that. Right on cue.
Yeah, if I can have a total cop-out on this question, I think having politically minded people who are communicators is the solution, because you have to have some sort of a mindset that understands politics and understands that sending out this tweet or that tweet or doing this or that might be, not advantageous for the candidate or what have you. But you also have to be a talented communicator in general too. And I think part of being a talented communicator is, to piggyback on what you were saying, is learning how to be authentic in a candidate's voice or in some sort of branding mechanism that makes people who want to follow you engage. And so those are the big things for me. But I have to stress very strongly that somebody with political skills should be. Yeah. I mean, I have a political science degree, so I ended up in this particular job for a variety of reasons, but I have political skills, and I think that's very important for the most successful people in politics, at least.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that I agree. I think that you need to have both sets of skills. I mean, you don't have to talk ratios, but I think that you have, from what I can tell, and correct me if I'm wrong, but just in general, it seems that the people who run the Romney's campaign digital operation tend to be more political savvy, and the people who are running the digital operation at Obama for America are a little bit more communication savvy, just in terms of the raw stuff. And also in terms of computer science kind of stuff. They're hiring engineers with no political background, not that they're doing messaging, but...
That's a very good observation, because most of Obama's people have come from the private sector, and some people are from corporate America, some people are from Facebook, some people are from a lot of variety of places that aren't necessarily political.
But when you're working on a campaign or whatever, you're really still working under the direction of in the digital sphere, you're still working under the direction of a communications director who shapes that overall messaging strategy, who has to be, without a doubt, the absolute best of both worlds, both politically savvy and communication savvy. And I think if you have a really good communications director shaping that strategy, I think you can do great things on social.
I'm glad you actually brought that up, because it's been an observation of mine. I've worked on a lot of campaigns that have seen social. The ones that have been most successful with social media in general or digital campaigning have been the ones that have not subjugated the digital person under a communications director in some fashion, and have given them the freedom to be senior staff, to be in on the meetings and get all the information about what's going on in the campaign, and I don't have to have it filtered down for someone else, and are free to be creative. It functions fine if there's somebody under a communications director, but the most successful and innovative ones I've always found have just been in the room when the planning is done as a senior staff member from top to bottom.
I think there's a lot of things that's applicable to. Social media is definitely one, and I think somebody who's running your AdWords campaign should also be somebody who's involved on the campaign on a day-to-day basis. Those things are just so minute by minute that you can't be sitting somewhere else and really keep your finger on the pulse.
Thanks, guys. So, speaking of the prime candidates that we were discussing this evening. So do you think that the social media teams are doing enough to make each political person stand out as far as Barack Obama? I know he's doing his signature thing where he signs BO at the end of his at the end of his tweets and things like that. Do you think they're doing enough, the Romney campaign or Obama campaign? Do you think they're doing enough to stand out as far as being kind of the head honcho, you want to say, of the communication as far as social media?
Well, I just want to say that I think they're doing plenty, but it's not in those official channels. I think the epic Twitter fights you see between Eric Bernstrom on the Romney campaign and David Axelrod on the Obama campaign. And yesterday there was Andrea Saul on the Romney campaign, who's the chief spokeswoman there, and Liz Smith on the Obama campaign, who is the head of rapid response there. And I think that's an authenticity kind of a thing. And they're always on message because you have spokesman versus spokesman fighting on Twitter. But I think that's a lot of fun. In terms of just how they're using social, personally, overall, I'm underwhelmed. I think you have some of these campaigns doing 2 tweets a day. Both campaigns doing like 2 tweets a day sometimes. I think I will say the Obama campaign is probably a little bit more active. And then I was talking to a colleague this morning about this. I have to say that the Romney campaign's Facebook presence is kind of negative and very mean-spirited. And I know they're trying to rally up a base, but I feel that's very hard to build an audience or to encourage new voters to come over to the Romney campaign if you're being negative. So, you know, they're running statuses like this status if you think Obama's economy has failed and that kind of thing. Which personally, I don't think that's the best way to get independent voters to vote for your candidate. But I mean, the Obama campaign's plenty negative too, but they seem to be taking a bit more positive tone on, which is a choice, but.
Well, I mean, I think that what the candidates are doing, I guess, it's fine. There's nothing particularly wrong with it. I found it kind of interesting in 2008, after John McCain lost to the social media president. Afterwards, it was kind of funny to watch John McCain kind of come out of his shell once he retreated back into the cave. He actually personally was tweeting all the damn time on his BlackBerry. You could see him walking up and down the halls of the Senate, just going like this all the time. And you could tell when he was actually sending out messages that it was actually him, and he became rather famous for being candid, kind of like the 2000 McCain that everybody kind of missed in 2008. Something like that would be really refreshing to see out of a presidential candidate. I don't think that, discipline-wise and how afraid they are of making a mistake, that they'll ever let that happen.
Ever.
But to be completely honest with you, in terms of a campaign as large as a presidential election, I don't even know if the candidate's social media profile is all that relevant. Really, I think what Obama is using his stuff for is as an organizing tool. I mean, you have Organizing for America or Obama for America, whatever it's called these days, has separate state Facebook pages for every single state they're in, and they're organizing around it. I mean, Virginia's has 28,000 people following it, and it's used as a tool to spread messaging and to organize around. And that's essentially what social media has become, I think, in this year for presidential elections. So.
I think it's tough to characterize the Obama's campaign. Obama's digital campaign is underwhelming. I mean, they have hundreds of. I mean, what's the staff?
I don't know the exact number, and they don't really say. But
it's big, though. I mean, it's.
Well, he's already spent $27 million.
Yeah, I mean, this is by far. There's a lot of resources allocated to just this space here, and there's been a lot of time spent as well. I think we have to also keep in mind that we're a bit of a different crowd than the people that they're trying to reach. Most of us are probably already decided. They're really looking for those people that are living their lives out in Missouri and in North Carolina and are vote once every 4 years. And they're not watching Fox News all the time. They're out there working and raising families. So, and they're not really social media users outside of maybe passively Facebook. So I think, and I've always admired the Obama campaign from afar, because I think after the campaign was over, you really saw after the election was over, you saw a campaign that was orchestrated by David Axelrod, as well as any campaign that's really ever been run, from a messaging standpoint, from a tactical standpoint, and obviously they had a good candidate too. So they kind of had every piece of the puzzle. But to think that they could just kind of tripped into that and they just kind of caught lightning in a bottle, I think is a little bit. It doesn't represent the truth, because that was a well-formulated plan that was executed, and they just happened to catch the brakes as well. The wind was at their backs, and they've had 4 years to prepare for this, and they know what they're doing, and they've spent a lot of money on digital. I'd love to see the count. I don't know what it is.
That's a key point, and that's a point that I always make. It's just they had the head start, and terms of raw numbers, I mean, there's two factors. It's the raw numbers of having the head start, and also the fact we're dealing with the power of incumbency here, which also has a big factor. And I think they're starting to use social media more and more to, play with that power of incumbency. You see the Obama campaign's Twitter feeds retweeting White House's Twitter feeds when he makes official speeches, and the Obama campaign Twitter feeds are always live tweeting events otherwise. But it's interesting to see how they're taking advantage of that. The other thing, and I should be fair here about rallying the base and what I said about the Romney campaign, there's a perfect example with the Obama campaign, and that was the president's comments about same-sex marriage last week. And there's a lot of people out there who are concerned that he's going to face problems with independent voters because of that stance. And the Obama campaign was proudly promoting that on social media. They made this little picture that said, a picture of the president and the quote he said, and it was like, share this picture on Facebook if you agree with the president. So also not the best way to get independent voters. I think it's really more of rallying the base.
It was almost immediately after that. Absolutely. It seemed like that stuff just went viral. I mean, saw people changing their cover walls to the they had the O with the human rights colors in it, and it went crazy, which was, I don't know, but it's definitely a good thing because it seems like people were right there ready to press the button as soon as that went out, and it was just all over the place.
It's definitely coordinated with Chicago, between Chicago and Washington,
Yeah, and I hate to beat this topic to death, to go on for a little bit, but I think it's really important to note that I don't necessarily think that Obama sending out 2 tweets a day is not intentional. I think that he's intentionally built his campaign along the lines of making the grassroots empowered, making people, essentially the best way you can convince somebody to be anything is if your friend said, I joined I support President Obama. That is a lot more persuasive than President Obama saying, please join me. So he's empowering and trying to empower people at the lowest levels to kind of build it up that way. So I don't necessarily think that they even care really necessarily what he is doing on his Twitter feed or his Facebook feed. I think it's a lot more important about what OFA Virginia is doing and all your friends are doing. And the gay marriage stuff was a perfect example of that, because as soon as that happened, they took care of it. Like it went like a wildfire. It wasn't because President Obama tweeted anything. So.
Okay, so I know we touched earlier on traditional media versus social media. Do you think it's wise to kind of focus your energy on one side, or is both sides equally important as far as getting the message out there? I know I was thinking the other day how the digital divide is really alive, as far as people not really, like you said, people out there working, Midwest families that work, they don't have access to computers or may not have time for that. Do you think it's a good medium to have, traditional media focus as opposed to social media focus? So do you think it should be equal time spent on that? What do you think about that?
I can start on this one.
Yeah.
It's my favorite question of the night because I've always been of the belief that digital is powerful and we're in it. So it's something that I value very strongly, but it is only one piece of the puzzle, and you have to work it into the rest of the strategy in a very detailed and integrated way. And if you don't do that, you'll fail. The thing about digital is that you're reaching people that might not be reachable otherwise. There's people that don't watch TV anymore, they watch everything on Hulu or YouTube or any number of things. I think it's something like 30% of people don't watch TV. So you're going to be using digital to hit people who aren't being hit by TV or radio, and hit them in different ways when they are seeing something, reinforcing a message. Stuff like that. Reinforcement doesn't work unless you buy a TV ad. It doesn't work unless you have a radio ad. So, there's ratios of how much you're supposed to spend on digital versus everything else, but it basically has to be baked in together as a big group. Otherwise, I don't think that it's even worth doing. So,
I think you also and I totally agree, and I think for this cycle and the next couple of cycles to come, you're going to always have these traditional ad buys. I think that the key part of that is just who you're targeting with these traditional buys. It's the older voters, the demographic that traditionally turns out in very high numbers to vote, and the people who it's really important for these campaigns to target. I'm pretty certain that no matter how much they spend on social, you'll be missing most of this demographic with social campaigns. So until that demographic's replaced by more tech savvy people, I think social traditional advertising is still going to be important. And also, can just anybody think of how creepy it's going to be, like having old people using social media and Twitter and stuff, like everyone, like, yeah, it's hard to
Did you
imagine.
ever see Minority Report? You're walking into the Gap, it's like that.
Yeah, I think I do. I should. That's what I do every day. We should have something to say. I don't think traditional media is not going to be replaced. It's just getting eroded away a little bit. I think even if you look at Obama in 2008, for all the press that he got for running a digital campaign, at the end of the day they spent $30 million on digital, which sounds like a ton of money to all of us. But when you consider they spent
Like 6%? What is yeah.
He spent $400 million on TV. So, for the digital and the social president, he certainly bought a lot of traditional media. And the reason for that is pretty simple. From an advertising perspective, you can just reach a higher percentage of the population quicker on traditional media. There's a lot of places where digital works very well. It's people used to talk about fragmentation when they talked about cable networks. You see that on steroids when you think about the internet. Your audiences are really very pure from a demographic standpoint when you look from site to site. I think Huffington Post is a good example. I know you guys have a lot of reach, but you guys are certainly more of a left of center type deal. And I don't know what percentage of your audience is, but if you're looking at it from an index standpoint, it would have to be in 300-400 range.
300-400.
An index, so you're going to be 3 or 4 times more likely to be a Democrat or liberal.
I don't have access to that kind of research, but I mean, there's no doubt that we do tend to lean left, and we always have been, and there have been some efforts to change that. We've made some hires,
I wasn't a witch hunt here by any means. The one thing I will say about digital that's very intriguing for guys like us in political advertising is that it's hyper-geographic. And we are so focused on geography when it comes to advertising that's something that really gives us a leg up that no other medium really has at this point.
Totally agree that I get a little cranky when I can only go down to the zip code. So it's important to note, I think, too, that anytime some new technology comes around, people proclaim that it will change everything, that it'll be the only thing we ever deal with in the future. But it never turns out that way. I mean, like when television took over presidential campaigns in 1960, when Nixon was facing off against Kennedy, people proclaimed the death of radio, but yet here it is 2012, and people are still advertising on radio. So I mean, it's just a new thing that we had to mix. And I think one of the most interesting things might be how the digital side of things changes traditional, how TV will be different in 10 years, and how things like that. That's what's really going to be the death of traditional, is that it won't be traditional.
How it's different now, the TV networks, they love Twitter because it's killing the DVR. Yeah. You can't look at your Twitter feed if you missed the Skins game. If you taped it, you got to just put your Twitter feed down.
Yeah. You just forget it. And just to touch on that, you notice how on shows now, that bottom right hand corner, you see that hashtag right in the corner. So I mean, if you like you say, you have to turn your Twitter off, and I've been guilty of that time. I'm like, I'm not going to look at it because people are going nuts with like shows and just everything else that's going on, and just have to just shut it off. So.
This time of year, all the season finale.
I know. It's crazy.
I got them spoiled to me last week. I'm so happy.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's 8:15.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's work on one more question and let's open it up to the floor real quick.
Yeah.
And then wrap it up.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So just to wrap it up, last question here. I know you were thinking about future as far as social media plans and things like that. Do you think it's essential for just campaigns to think ahead, or is it just the right thing to do, just to go with the program, go with the flow per se? Do you think it's a good idea to plan ahead, or just roll with the punches?
The nature of political campaigns is the one thing you don't have a lot of is time. Mm-hmm. And so I think they have to deal with the here and now. So particularly when you get down below the presidential level, they kind of have to deal with what's here, and because you look at a guy like Dick Lugar in Indiana, who was however old, but he couldn't be planning for a general election. His fight was now. So So I think it's tough. It's tough for them to kind of look beyond the election because it's for all the crap that politicians get, it's a tough job. You have a referendum on your head every 2 years.
I think it's two answers to your question. Which is, the first is that I think it's important for people like me, operatives, to be thinking ahead, to be looking at what the next thing we can do next year, next cycle, whatever. It's important for campaigns to deal with the here and now where we have a toolkit that we can actually work with. I mean, Obama is the one exception to that because his campaign has been planning ahead for a year because he's had the luxury of being able to do that, he had the money and the time, and so on and so forth. But that's the two answers for me. Operatives have to think differently than campaigns should.
I think strategically thinking, I think people should be thinking ahead. But in terms of the physical tools you're presented with, you can't. You don't know what the next big thing is. There's new social tools being innovated and being introduced all the time, but who knows if they're going to catch on or not. There's for every Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Tumblr, there are like so many failures, and campaigns can't just like say I'm going to do this random social network and if it fails, whatever. No, they've got to have this. I feel this broad strategic outline of what they'll do, but they then have to be in the here and now as far as what tools they'll be using and what features of those tools. And I think that's key because Facebook keeps changing, and Twitter keeps changing how it deals with ads and stuff. Facebook keeps on changing its targeting and all of that stuff, and how it runs the pages, and how it screws around with the newsfeed and mucks it up, and all of that, which I'm not happy about. But
it is funny because I know a guy that he claims to be the king of Meetup.com, and now that's not worth a lot because there's a lot of things that come and go very quickly. So it is tough to stay ahead.
That was one of the first. All right, guys. So I guess we can open the floor for questions here if you guys have anything.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences in approach between trying to convince the undecided voter, which you talked about a little, versus get out the vote campaign?
That is my life for the next month. I alluded to it when I introduced myself, but we're doing Wisconsin right now, and Wisconsin is kind of a unique case in that Governor Walker has 100% name approval in all the polls that we have, which I don't even think President Obama has. And everybody in that state has basically made up their mind. You have 48% on the Republican side, essentially, and 48% on the Democratic side, and we're kind of fighting over 4%, which is just obscenely low. So, I'm used to trying to get out the Republican vote, which is very easy. You identify who a Republican is, and then you throw them some red meat. It's pretty easy to advertise to your own crew. But if you're trying to persuade someone else, you have to go through a different set of strategies. So I've relied pretty heavily on holding people captive and making them watch our videos, for example, doing pre-roll video. Things like that is a little bit heavier in this campaign than it is in other campaigns. Essentially, you're just trying to find ways to make sure that the person who you are trying to reach can see what you're trying to make them. And that's a very difficult thing when somebody is an undecided voter because usually they're not engaged in politics, so they're not going to sit there and tell you everything that they like about politics because they probably don't like it. And it's tough to identify them.
Yeah, no, just to clarify my impression, I run elections in Fairfax County, and if we're really lucky, we get 30 to 40% of people come out. So we're the other 60%. And if you already know where they would fall if they were to go vote, how do you get them out there? The other question, aside from being undecided.
When I used to run campaigns before I got into advertising, and there was one of my favorite quotes was that primary voters are born, they're not made. I think that, and I've always thought that was a really, really true in politics. Presidential voters are a different thing. They can really fluctuate. You'll get those people that are sitting on the sidelines. But when you're talking about your local elections and your primaries, it's really the same people over and over and over again. I ran campaigns in New York, and to watch my friends on the Democratic side run campaigns, they would run targets to people that have voted in the last 3 Democratic primaries, the last 4 Democratic. They would treat these people very differently. And I just thought, well, how different really are these people demographically? They look the same. And they would claim that there were big differences between people that skipped this election and not that election. So it's a tough nut to crack.
I think from a campaign perspective too, I think the first thing is to identify who the heck these people are and how to find them. I mean, we've done a lot of polling in Wisconsin to find out what that 4% is. And I'm not going to give the trade secrets or anything, but they watch certain television shows. They are a certain age. They occupy a certain part of the state and some things like that. So that kind of informs your strategy and where you're advertising and who you're trying to reach and what type of person you're trying to touch on. And that's essentially the best thing we can do right now. I wish it was more robust and we could do something else, but it's just trying to be as smart as possible about finding out who they are and then touching them. So.
By the time we get addressable ads online, they'll make them illegal. So.
Anybody else have any questions?
People may think I sound crazy when I ask this question. I'm worried about the older generations that are on social media, particularly Facebook, because all the latest research is showing that they're catching up, and more of them are getting on Facebook. And I know just from personal experience in my family, my aunts who are in their 70s use Facebook. And one of research just came out earlier this week or last week that showed a huge percentage of families with 3 generations on Facebook, where the kids, the mom, the grandmas all on Facebook. And I know my mom has shared issue-related stuff on Facebook with her friends that she gets fired up about, like Medicare or the Medicines Women Act that's being debated. And so I'm wondering if we're missing something by not kind of doing some targeted viral campaigns on Facebook for this other demographic, besides just the young people that we talk about.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, go for it.
With that kind of question, I think it's important to note that while there has been growth in those areas, I'm certainly not discounting the idea that we should be aggressively pursuing them. What they do once they join is a very different thing still. I'm a 31-year-old person. I share things 24 hours a day on Facebook. My mom joined, like a year ago, and I don't know if she's logged in the last 3 months. So there's certainly plenty of things that we can do. And we do. If we're trying to target, if I was at the RNC right now and an issue related to Medicare came up, I would be running ads for people who were 65 plus and trying to reach them in some fashion, because I think it's still worth doing even if they're not that engaged. But it is important to keep in mind that different demographics do behave differently once they are on those things.
I think that's the demographic that's played a lot of attention to by people like us. And I think you saw that when I think the Romney campaign really did a really smart execution when Obama made the comment about Ann Romney being being a housewife is not a career. They really went after women 35 to 50.
It's not actually what she said.
Or was I'm
Exactly.
sorry. I messed it
the
up.
Obama campaign. It's
They
the
really-
Democratic strategist who said that.
But they really targeted women 35 to 54 with advertising immediately, trying to get that out there.
Yeah, they actually had a bumper sticker within like 24 hours. They had a special page made up that said like "Moms Drive the Economy" or something, and they drove advertising to this bumper sticker page that somehow got a Mitt Romney bumper sticker on people's cars. So
It was an excellent rapid response job done by the Romney campaign at a very late hour in a very short amount of time. So definitely a great example of how social media can be used in a rapid response kind of a way. And that was a very, I'd say, it sounds corny, but I'd say that was a pretty historic night, in that it was something that blew up. And I talked about it in discussion. That happened before the Hillary Rosen comment, but that was really something that blew up entirely. This is something made on CNN, but it blew up entirely on Twitter afterward. It blew up, with Ann Romney trying to make that statement, with the Obama campaign advisors totally condemning it, with Hillary Rosen blogging on the Huffington Post and saying, within the 2 hours of this and explaining herself, and she had to backtrack, and they kind of scared her into backtracking her comments and apologizing essentially, and it was really a job well done by the Romney campaign. Totally no emails. I didn't get any. I'm on all these lists. I didn't get any emails about this. No statements, no paper, as we call it. It was all done on Twitter.
And they had Google ads up in an hour.
yeah. The most important thing, though, going back to your question, to reach that demographic that you're talking about, I think it highlights the importance of matching up everything in your campaign if you're running a television ad that's aimed at seniors, to have matching branding, matching demographic targeting, and things like that that are actually reaching the same people, so that the message gets reinforced, that it's recognized, and that things like that happen, so that you're kind of bringing home what you're doing in the traditional media space. So.
So I work for the Washington Post, and people get a lot of social media and politics, and I feel like this spring there's been a lot of attention paid to like media trying to measure conversation as it relates to politics on things like our mention machine or like your Facebook had a partnership where they were measuring sentiment of conversation. And I feel like there's a link missing there between like what actually happens with that. So I'm wondering what you hear about with these different metrics of like Twitter mentions or Facebook conversation. Is that important to you at all? Is that really what kind of thing do you think?
So one of the things we used to look at before the internet came around was these long surveys, and they're still out there, and verbatims. So when you made those telephone calls and you asked people, who do you like this, what were they actually saying? What was getting picked up? I think when you look at some of the social listening tools out there, you're getting real-time verbatims, and so it's you used to have to wait for days for that survey to come back, and that's happening in real time. But I think once you do that, I don't know what you guys are finding, but the conversation is pretty negative around politics.
Yes.
No, you don't typically say, I love this.
Right.
The interesting thing about the social listening software stuff has been that I've found that while it gives you the verbatim, while you're looking at what is actually happening, what people are saying, if there's any sort of automated way to try and find sentiment, it never works. Like the best among them get 50 or 60% sentiment, and that's really just, I could guess half that myself. So it's really difficult to do. So I think I don't necessarily pay as much attention to it as anyone else. I look for big trends, big topics. The Ann Romney thing is a great example of that, because we noticed that Ann Romney's name was being mentioned more than Hillary Rosen's name was, which tells you some stuff, but it's more probably supportive of Ann Romney in that respect. So I like to think of 30,000-foot view in a lot of respects with that. So.
I don't personally use any tools in my job to do sentiment analysis. There has been talk at my job, my old job, but it's not worth it. It's a fortune to do that, and it's not worth it in my setting. I get a good sense of it. There's a fire hose of tweets, fire hose of Facebook posts, and I just subscribe to a bunch of people. I follow an account that follows 9,000 people. My personal account follows about 3,000. Just taking the fire hose, and that is almost like a 30,000 view. I follow people from across the spectrum, across the country, around the world.
Version of sampling.
Right, and you can get a very good sense of how people feel about things. People often react based on how this fire hose is reacting. So I could tell Amendment 1 last week in North Carolina bad, and even because the Democrats and I follow were voicing negativity, and I think there were not many people voicing support. I noticed on social media there were people, but then Obama gay marriage comments. Those same people voicing negativity were all overwhelmingly positive, and it didn't stop for hours. It was like crazy. People could say it was stupid, but then they were getting called. People could say they didn't like, but then they were getting kind of like called bigots and stuff, mean things by the supporters of Obama's comments. It was really like either support this or shut up kind of a thing. I noticed.
Any more questions? Or? Oh, two more? Okay, yep.
Hi, my name is Jim. I've been a grassroots organizer in the area for a while, and actually, I don't know if I'm giving Republicans a shout out, but help them take some solace. I actually don't think we're as good at social media in many respects as we were in 2008. Twitter has made big advances.
Are you a Democrat? Or you're a Republican?
No, I'm
Anybody who self-identifies as a grassroots
the Obama campaign created with the help of Chris Hughes from Facebook, created the MyBarackObama.com network, kind of social network, in 2007, and it's pretty much dormant now. No local organizers utilize it. It's basically a bunch of Google group type communities that haven't been used very often in the last few years. There hasn't been anything to replace it. I mean, one thing I read was that a lot of people think that creating your own social network doesn't work. But on the other hand, Facebook groups are really the best way to organize. Facebook pages are not. As many of you probably know, I mean, I like 680 pages on Facebook. I don't see them in my newsfeed. I mean, if I like a page, I'll probably never hear from it again. I hear they're changing some things about Facebook pages, but right now the groups are the best way to organize. And so in one case, I have the Generation Obama DC Facebook group. That's still in existence because we kept it active. Northern Virginia for Obama, we had up to 1,200 members. And then because it was not as active as it should be, because it was not an election year every year, Facebook actually got rid of groups that weren't as active, I mean, in terms of all their members. So that group is pretty much, you know, we've had to start from scratch. So, so I guess I don't know if you guys have seen anything from your perspective like this about how actually on the local level there have been some setbacks in terms of the tools that we've been able to use. And not until recently, even on Twitter, have local organizers been hired and they're starting to use Twitter. So anyway, I don't know if you guys would have any insight on that, but from a local organizer's perspective, actually, we haven't made all the 100% of an advance since 2008.
Two thoughts. I'm sorry.
No, please.
Two thoughts on this. The first one is that whenever you're dealing with your own side and you're analyzing it from the inside, you always think you're terrible, and that the other side is just beating your pants off. It's always, I hear that from Republicans, I hear from Democrats. But the more important thing, though, is that Obama is treating this election year very differently than he did in 2008. In 2008, they launched My Barack Obama like in 2007 when he made his announcement, I think. They have actually been cooking up something called Dashboard, which is essentially their version of My Barack Obama. It's a way to organize not only supporters and everything else, but the people who are going to be doing door knocking, making phone calls and stuff will be using it. And they have been developing it all this time, and they're going to, I don't know exactly when they're launching it, but it's within the next month, I think. So they're going to be using that this year, so you may be changing your opinion when you see it. I don't know how good it'll be, but from what I've heard about it, it's supposed to be pretty, it's supposed to be pretty impressive. So
there's a lot of hype about Dashboard. The Guardian, of all places, kind of broke that story. You know, they're doing a great job getting into this market here in the U.S. So look that up on the Guardian site. I've heard they've already started using Dashboard in some places. It's really, yeah, exactly, and it's really going to be. I feel it's more of an organizing tool than a front-facing social network like My Barack Obama was. It's going to be used by neighborhood organizers to input voter data, go out for a canvas, input the results of the canvas immediately, so that data is available to the folks in Chicago and the folks in the state headquarters, because there's a huge state organization in all of the states for the Obama campaign. So that's really just, it's almost considered like a fan. The way I see it, and look, I haven't played with it and I haven't really gotten much background guidance on it, but the way I see it is really a really special data entry tool that allows the folks at OFA to harness this data instantly in a very streamlined fashion. That's what I think it is. So don't quote me on it.
Is that a social network?
I don't believe it is.
That's the problem.
well, it sort of is, but I think it's supposed to be differently. I mean, this is, you know,
Speculation.
of all the free lunches I get at the RGA from vendors trying to sell me things, almost, you know, like 70% of them are from some group or organization that's basically trying to build something like Dashboard, which is, I think, the next real, I mean, when we devote real resources to trying to change digital and how it works with politics, I think that the grassroots organizing tools are really what it's going to be, because you're going to have to find a way to have an iPad in your hand, going door to door, saying responses once you get in there, and having it communicate directly to your headquarters within 5 seconds, rather than writing things on a notebook from a printed off Excel sheet. That is what we are still doing for the most part around the country now. So there's companies all over the place that are trying to build these things. They're still kind of crappy. They're kind of working their way through, but I think by the next presidential election, maybe even the next midterm, we might see that kind of stuff really take hold of a lot of campaigns.